Okay, see you soon.
In line with some of the stats I'm going to use in a minute, but I mean, we shouldn't ever underestimate though the intrastate and even local tourism market. It's also true that lots of people haven't had much else to spend their money on for a while. Apart from online shopping, that's bad, and gambling, that was bad, and alcohol, that was bad. But anyway. I don't know if you've seen the stats of the things that have increased the most, you know, and it was it's certainly alcohol and online gambling.
That's concerning. That's scary when people get that TAB app on their phones. You can gamble any time of day. Ugh.
Yeah, sports bet, you know, there's heaps of them. But anyway, by the by, everyone's got to have, well, hopefully only little tiny vices.
Right.
So, but you know, generally it shows that people were pretty excited to get back out to, you know, to the local tourism attractions or the local natural environment.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, we're so lucky here in the Territory.
Oh, you are?
Have these spaces. It's really amazing.
Well, it is amazing. It's an amazing place. It's fantastic.
It's really
and it's beautiful, really, really beautiful, and really not like anywhere else. So,
have you been out to this part of Australia before?
Yep, sure have. A few times. Never for long enough. You know, it's always one of those things. So every time I've been to Alice and the surrounding areas, it's, you know, I've, you know, had a few days or a week or something, not long enough. Went up to Berkeley Lodge the year before last. That was pretty cool. Wow. I've been to Darwin lots of times. Been to Katherine a few times. I'm a pharmacist really, and I did some locums in the Northern Territory back in the day. So did a locum at a pharmacy at Tennant Creek and one at, you know, for a month in Tennant Creek. That was pretty exciting.
Interesting town.
And a 2-week stint in Katherine. So, but you know, that's a long time ago. And they've, you know, I was at Katherine not so long ago. And you know, it's different than it was when I was being a pharmacist locum 20 years ago.
Definitely. Well, that's beautiful. That's great that you've spent so much time out here. It's really special. It's really amazing. There's a common story in Central Australia is people come out and, you know, end up doing a residency for a couple of months and find themselves here 2 years later, fully settled in and able to leave.
Absolutely. In fact, it's always interesting hearing some of the stories of the Americans who are at the base, Pine, you know, thingamagooch, who Pine Gap, who have stayed, you know, or have, you know, who just got to love, as much as Pine Gap interfaces at all, which of course it has doesn't totally, but, you know, fascinating the people who have just fallen in love with the area, which is great.
Yeah, it's really special.
And maybe that's just that I know a few of them, so, and there might not be many, but I just happen to know them, so.
That's lovely. Well, we have a couple of partners of Pine Gap workers working in tourism in Central Australia, and they're all, yeah, they're wonderful. They really, you know, they add a lot to the community, so.
Absolutely. No, that's, that is great.
All right.
Okay.
I'm going to begin the introduction right now. Okay, all right, guys. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Switch On After Switch Off, the 6th installment of the Power Up tutorial series. Our goal is to provide tourism businesses in the Northern Territory a space to upskill as we unpack topics that have an ongoing relevance for your business. These weekly webinars, brought to you by the Business Enterprise Development Team, Stephen Miles from Tourism Top End and myself, Anna Dakin from Tourism Central Australia, will be your hosts. The series is structured around the Business Enterprise Development Programme's 9-pillar model, which is a tool to help businesses identify their maturity in a range of areas necessary to running a successful business. Stephen and I are keen to get you acquainted with the programme, and if you'd like to know more about it, you can drop us a line after the webinar to arrange a one-on-one session. We'll be sharing our contact details at the end. So we have a little bit of housekeeping for today's session. We'll be having a 30-minute presentation followed by a 15-minute Q&A. And if you have questions during the presentation, please write them in the chat area and we'll save them up for the end. Today's session will cover some of the key considerations for small businesses who are thinking about reopening after having been closed due to COVID-19. Our speaker today is Kate Carnell, the Australian Small Business and Family Enterprise Ombudsman. Kate's role is to support small businesses and family enterprises and to enable them to grow and thrive. Kate Carnell and her team can assist with challenges and disputes and advocate on behalf of small businesses and family enterprises across Australia. Her office has the legislative powers needed to effectively influence lawmakers in Australia. Welcome, Kate. We're thrilled to be hosting such a distinguished speaker, and we're really looking forward to your expert insights.
Look, thank you so much for having me, and who would have thought we would be, you know, meeting via Zoom at such an extraordinary time. As I said, as we were talking earlier, I've spent a bit of time in the NT, and like everybody else who's spent any time there, have absolutely loved it. It's a fantastic place. But as you all know really well, tourism is incredibly important to the Northern Territory. I've sort of been just given advice from the sideline here. Maybe we can just go on to my PowerPoint presentation now, and let's just go on to Anna, we might need a hand with screen sharing. You got it?
I might pass you over to Stephen for
Stephen, can I share my screen, please? It's okay. I'll keep going while we talk about that.
Try now.
Perfect. Here we go. Okay, let's have a bit of a look at tourism in the Northern Territory. Now, I'm telling you all how to suck eggs here, really, but I think it's really important to give you, just to put all of what I want to say in context. You know, in the Northern Territory economy, as you'd know, is losing at least $200 million a month since the tourism industry was, let's be fair, virtually shut down. Huge drop in visitor numbers, and let's be fair, a huge hit on jobs and the economy more broadly. So I suppose message is everything that you know really well is tourism is, is really important. But I'd like to just share some really interesting stats right now, and that's where tourism comes from in Australia generally, and then a little bit about the Northern Territory. And this is from a really positive perspective, because I think often we think you know, it's international tourism that, you know, is the backbone of Australia and so on. But, you know, it really isn't. And as you can see from that graph, right on, as I'm looking at the left-hand side, are capital cities. Now, the green bit is international tourism, but you can see that it means that capital cities are much more reliant on international tourism than our regional areas. And I'd have to say Darwin is less reliant on international tourism than, say, Sydney or Melbourne are. So although it matters, and, you know, it is 23% of our tourism dollars, there is a very large amount of other dollars that are actually local tourism, you know, so local residents that are getting out and about and using tourist facilities, accommodation, restaurants, you know, those sorts of things. But intrastate tourists that from Darwin that go to Alice Springs, or Darwin that go to somewhere else around the NT, and of course interstate tourists as well. So between local, intrastate and interstate tourism, you've got a very, very large percent of the tourism dollars in Australia. So even if we continue to be closed down, shall we say, to international tourism, there is a huge opportunity for tourism really to get up and running, you know, I'd have to say reasonably quickly in comparison to what we're expecting. And I haven't here talked about the other really important figure, and that's the fact that Australians were spending $65 billion on overseas travel. Now they can't do it anymore, so they're going to have to travel and holiday locally, or possibly in New Zealand. If we and I'll talk a bit more about those figures in just a moment. It is important to remember that from a Northern Territory perspective, in terms of these figures here, those the intrastate tourism figures are a little bit less important than they are in some of the bigger states and more populated states, for obvious reasons. But this is a really interesting graph. Now you can see where my big red oval is down at the end of the screen. That's regional NT and Darwin, and that shows you that, you know, interstate tourism really matters to Darwin and the NT. But down at the bottom, you can see the local tourism and the intrastate tourism figures as well. So it's certainly true that from a Northern Territory perspective, opening the borders is really important. In fact, much more important than international tourism, which is good, because I think we're going to be struggling for a while with international tourism. These are some of the really interesting figures, and this is the supposed trans-Tasman bubble figures. As we know, New Zealand now has no active cases of COVID-19, and so they are in a really good position. So reopening flights across the Tasman will really throw a lifeline both to Australia's but also New Zealand's tourism industry. You can see those figures. I found those really interesting, that 1.43 million Kiwis visited Australia last year. That's almost everybody. No, it's not. That's unfair. But over 3 million New Zealanders travelled overseas. So on top of, it's about 3.4 million. So there's another 2 million Kiwis that travelled overseas but didn't come to Australia. And if they don't have any other options, hopefully we can grab a chunk of those to Australia when the bubble is blown up, you know, is over. Both of our operations. Interestingly, 1.5 million Australians visited New Zealand last year as well. So, and New Zealand, I didn't realise that, this last dot point, that New Zealand is our second largest source of tourism after China. So 1.43 million Kiwis visited Australia and 1.44 million Chinese. So it's incredibly close. So the importance of opening up the bubble to Australian and New Zealand tourism is really important. But I suppose using all of those figures, it really shows that once Australian, our state borders are open, and if the New Zealand bubble, the Trans-Tasman bubble, can be organised, and I'd have to say it probably matters more to the New Zealand economy, even more than it does to the Australian economy, although it matters a lot to us as well. I think it's going to be absolutely essential to both countries to allow this to happen. But when it happens, you can see from my previous figures, it really addresses a very large chunk of tourism in Australia. When you add to that the Australians that won't be able to go overseas apart from New Zealand, and the New Zealanders who won't be able to go overseas to anywhere but Australia, I think it shows that there really is a capacity to deliver a pretty vibrant tourism industry in both countries, even without global tourism being available in the foreseeable future. And I think that's really important because, you know, it's important to understand that we have a solid future and we're progressing really quite quickly towards those things happening. I'm sure many of us would like borders to be open between states last week. I certainly would, but we're progressing that way and progressing quite quickly. So what does this all mean? What do we have to do? Well, I know, you know, everybody talks about innovation and it is pretty fundamental, but it has never been more important. If any of you believe that somehow, you know, all of this will happen and will then just revert back and the whole world, your whole industry, your business, others will be exactly the same as it was previously, you are kidding yourself and need to have another look at your business plan because it isn't going to. I mean, there might be the outliers that it is, but quite seriously, you know, the world has changed and it will continue to be different. So your online offerings, you know, your capacity to offer virtual tours and experience for people to be able to shop for their experience online and do that in a much more discerning way than I think they probably did in the past is really important. You know, it's true that, you know, sites like Travel Advisor and others will continue to be important, but I think what we've seen is that with so many of us living and breathing what we're doing at the moment, Zoom, you know, all sorts of other things, we actually understand the online experience lots better, are more discerning and are looking for different products, not just the same old. So how we sell our product, what the experience looks like online, what the service looks like online is now much more important. I must admit, I loved the case I read last week, which was the National Wine Centre of Australia, that's in South Australia, as you know, have been hosting virtual wine tastings and masterclasses. So what they did is they sent out samples of, I think, 6 wines to people who signed up and paid, of course. They they found a way to be able to pour these wines without into largish test tubes without any air and properly looked after, send them out, and they conducted masterclasses for 2 hours via Zoom, and you got the taste you want. All you had to do was come up with 6 glasses for the wines and so on. And both April and May masterclasses are booked out. Now, it's not for everybody, but it's always interesting to see, quite innovative approaches that they've now got lots more people doing their masterclasses than they ever had when they were just face-to-face and reliant on tourists and locals that were actually there. And I'd be incredibly surprised if the centre doesn't continue that offering going forward. And I think, one of the interesting things about this whole, dreadful scenario for everybody has been the fact that so many businesses, all of us, had to pivot at some level, look at different ways of doing things, different ways of interacting. Some have worked and some haven't. And the challenge is to work out what's worked and make sure it's part of your forward business model. So don't just throw it out when you can be open again, because some things are substantially better than what we were offering before. So I suppose that's where, digitisation comes on board. And what I'm talking about now is how you're running your business, not how you're communicating your business or how you're communicating with customers for a moment. I hope that one of the things that comes out of this is that more businesses in Australia have realised that you really can't run a business that isn't heavily digitised, doesn't have digital marketing strategies, doesn't have a solid underpinning software platform to do accounts, to do customer accounts, to do your own accounts, all of those things. But the interesting thing is businesses that are fully digitised, and importantly that use all of the very smart available apps, many of which are free at some level, to run their businesses, are 30% more likely to grow. Just fascinating, isn't it? That's a lot. 20% more likely to employ more staff. So, this is not just a nice to have. This is now a must have if we are to improve our productivity and to be able to deliver more and more efficiently in a less time-consuming manner. So when you think about apps, most of us probably think about, games and, for me, Audible books. I really like Audible books when I'm exercising, because I really hate exercising, so I need something else to think about. But there's a range of business apps that are really, really cool and really good. And look, there's a whole range of different app stores. There's obviously Apple, Xero has an app marketplace. Google's G Suite's marketplace is fantastic. Salesforce has one. Look, you could go on. Apps like Homebase, Square, Deputy, Slack, Hootsuite, Canva, TripIt. But one that everyone should have a look at is the ATO app, because you wouldn't really look for that normally, would you? But it's really clever because it's an app you just download. It's obviously free, but you can take photos of invoices, or at the petrol station you get the chit from the cash register, and you put it on your dashboard and it fades. Can't see it anymore. It's no good. So the ATO app allows you to take a photo of that, and it actually files it for you into the appropriate place so you can download it at tax time. Some cool things like that. So this is a time when digitising our business, using these sorts of mostly free apps, and by the way, these apps do everything from, you know, expense processing, that's Expensify, you know, job scheduling, invoicing, rosters, real-time collaboration capacity, social media stuff, you know, anyway, I could go on. It is worth having a look, and it's worth embracing them because they are really simple to use. Incredibly simple to use because even I can. So they must be simple to use. So get onto them. It's part of growing your business, and it's part of spending more time, you know, looking at how you're going to run your business rather than doing rotten paperwork and other things that, you know, there are that fundamentally digitized solutions do better than we do and faster. Websites, you know, websites is like the Yellow Pages used to be, really. And it's always surprising to me how many people don't focus on what their website looks like. You know, haven't updated it for a while, have got wrong hours of opening, you know, all sorts of stuff on their website. And have websites that are clunky as all hell, were obviously put together on the cheap 5 years ago, and somehow expect that to be something that doesn't reflect badly on their business. Well, I tell you what, it does. And so this is the time to make sure your website is refreshed, that you do some user testing of your website. Now, user testing, you know, can be the neighbours, the staff, doesn't have to be expensive. Just go and get some people who don't spend time on your website to have a play and see what they think and give you advice, because you need to. You need to make sure it's mobile enabled, so it works well on mobile devices. That's what everyone's using now, so it's not much point if it only works on fixed screen computers. And you've got to make sure that that it engages consumers. You know, this is your window to the world. This really matters. And if you haven't ever gone to Google Garage, go and have a look, because Google's got a whole range of really cool little videos and training modules and so on, and how to digitize effectively and obviously very cheaply, because these are free, and really simple to get through, not reams of script, you know, great little videos, cameos, training programs and so on. You know, there's stuff you can pay for, there's no doubt, but there's a lot of stuff that you don't have, and which of course brings me to social media. This is how we communicate. It's how I have a look for the next holiday I'm going to go to in the Northern Territory. I'll go to websites certainly, but I'll be looking at what's floating around social media. And Tourism Australia has some great free videos on offer to small business, which really give great advice on how to make the most out of social media, how to put together content on a budget, in other words, really cheaply, all the stuff that we need. And Tourism Northern Territory too does some really good things. So I suppose what I'm saying is that there are a lot of inexpensive things that you can grab hold of that can dramatically improve the look, feel, communication and marketing capacity of your business. You know, you just have to have a look at the Australian Reptile Park, where their video of George the Wombat having his tummy tickled by one of his handlers got 60 million views. You know, I have no idea why, but it did, and it really generated visitation at the park. And you know, Hamilton Island, you know, with their series of Instagram posts of that big chair that they've got. So people go and find the big chair and have photos taken on the big chair. You know, people do weird things, but they work in social media. and they encourage people to visit your particular tourism venue. And you know, we all know on Instagram there is a huge number of these pretty smart ideas. I can't finish without talking very quickly about communication. Now, when I talk about communication, this is a really, really, really tough time. I can't imagine a more stressful time in business. I ran my own businesses for lots of years, so I know what it's like to have your house riding on it, but I have no idea what it's like to literally overnight have your business closed, you know, with virtually no customers, sometimes no customers. You know, it's true that there's a range of supports from state government, from federal government, from territory government up there, but it's really hard. But it's hard for your staff too, you know. And so the importance of keeping in touch with your staff, those that might be on JobKeeper at the moment, and making sure they know where you're up to, what you're thinking about, and also you're just making sure they're okay as well. But the thing I wanted to really talk about was your customers, the previous visitors that have used your particular facility. Hopefully you've got a chunk of their email addresses. Stay in contact with them, tell them where your business is up to. Possibly you might be in the business now of offering a bit of a package to people who are willing to come back, maybe a bit of a discount, maybe, you know, something, the bottle of wine on arrival or something for people who book now, and they can pick a date when the borders are open. Encourage me to put to make a plan now, to come to your establishment, to hopefully to pay a bit of a deposit to make sure I'm serious, but you know, your choice. Don't charge me, for booking later, because I haven't got any choice. But I think there's a lot of things you can do. All of us want to get out. We want to travel. We want to come and see you. Give us a reason to book with your particular facility. Look, you can see all those, but I'm just going to finish now with talking about My Business Health. This is part of our website. You can just type into a Google search My Business Health. But what we're trying to do here is go through all of the things you need to do to keep your business healthy. So it's got a breakdown of all of the federal government grants, loans, other things that are available as a result of COVID. It's also got the Northern Territory offerings as well. It talks about cash flow. It talks about what your banks might be offering, what the ATO will do for you. It talks about what the commercial tenancy code looks like. But most importantly, it also makes the point that we get that this is really hard, and that even under best of times, 1 in 4 Australians experience mental health issues at any time. And this is not the best of times. Nobody is Superman or Superwoman, and to deal with the stress that many of you guys are going through at the moment, you know, is in that Superman, Superwoman space. So you need to look after your own mental health. You need to take that seriously, because I tell you what, when the borders open, when we're back in business, you need to be firing on all cylinders. If you're not, you won't be in the position that you need to be. To be the best that you can be, so your business can be the best it can be, and you can, be the leader that can really motivate your staff to get up and running. So go to My Business Health. It's really easy to navigate, but it also gives you some good advice on how to look after yourself, but how to look after your business as well, how to manage things like cash flow, expenses, all of those things, all pretty simple. But hopefully good, solid, common sense, but the information that you're really looking for. So to sum all that up, business at best is tough. Cash flow is king. We all know that. You can't have cash flow without money coming in. You just got money coming out at the moment. This is a problem. It's great that there is things like JobKeeper and so on, but this is a time to really use the opportunity to digitise your business, to get your social media stuff happening, to, you know, to look at what you're doing on places like Instagram and so on, work out how you're convincing me to come to your business as soon as borders are open. Get me to book, because you've got such a great offering and it looks so cool. There's a lot of us over here in the eastern states that are desperate to get to the NT. We'll get more desperate the colder it is. I was just saying before, it's a pretty good day today in Canberra. It's 13 degrees. Yeah, so no wonder we're trying to get to the NT, really. So look, thanks very much. I'm available to answer questions now. Over to you guys. Anna.
Thank you so much, Kate. That was really, really insightful. I'm going to hand over to Stephen, who's got a couple of points.
Thanks, Kate. Yeah, thanks for your presentation. And it's pretty sobering to see those statistics at the start of how dire the situation really is in Australia, but also in the Northern Territory. And then I love the way that you flipped it on its head and said, but no one can travel internationally. So all of that spending that we spent as Australians overseas can now be invested back into Australia, and that makes me very hopeful looking forward. So thank you for saying that, and that was really, really heartwarming as well. Yeah, and it's probably a statistic or a point that you don't normally put two and two together, that we actually spend money out, and it's the other people that spend money in, and so it's now we can have two hands feeding the same pot, which is a nice time.
Absolutely, but it does show, doesn't it? If you're putting together marketing plans, you know, you're really marketing to Australians and New Zealanders at the moment. At no point in doing, you know, overseas stuff or whatever. So in terms of working out who your customer is, you know, over the next, say, 12, 18 months, we have to assume it's New Zealanders and Australians. And in Australian terms, that probably means, well, it means all Australians, but where the population bases are, you know, Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane, you know, and we're the ones who want to come to the NT. So encourage us, but don't forget a marketing campaign into New Zealand, because there's a lot of them that come to Australia and they can't go overseas either. So they have to spend their money coming to us.
Yes. Good points. And you also talked about adopting technologies and innovating, using those digital assets to then streamline your business. So then the manual processes are out the door, because right now it's all about the technology and the online world, as we're doing today, instead of in person. And so to do that, you also shared about a number of different apps and tools that businesses can use. We've had a couple of questions around this point. One being, is there an app that you would recommend, or that you can also find out for us, that helps with rostering?
Look, absolutely. Deputy is a really good one. Have a look at it. There's a number of others as well. That's just one I've used pretty successfully in the past. But do go to those app stores that I was talking about and have a look. There's lots of ranking best business app type scenarios, but you know, Deputy does it really, really well. But it depends a little on what you're looking for, you know, in a rostering app. Because there's things like, say, that Deputy does rostering really well. An app called Homebase does a scheduling approach with a capacity to measure hours worked. So if you happen to be in that sort of casual contractor environment, you know, it's a way you can schedule both yours but also your staff, your contractors' work, and it can record hours worked, so you can work out what to pay them, really. You know, there's a chunk of these things that work really well. So sorry, but deputy's the only one I've used, but there's lots of others.
I've heard some really good things about deputy, actually.
It's fantastic. And it's so easy to use. I can do it, so it's really good.
That's great. We'll definitely have to check that one out. I've got a few questions to do with finance. First being, I know that you guys do quite a lot of lobbying on behalf of small businesses.
Yep.
Is there any specific lobbying that you're doing at the moment to encourage the government to support small businesses to get the economy firing on all cylinders again?
Look, absolutely. Thanks for that question. And the answer is yes. In fact, we just released a roadmap to recovery document, which is available on our website for somebody who's having trouble sleeping. But hopefully it's not that bad, really. But in fact, it's not that bad. We only write quick documents because we understand that people don't have an awful lot of time. But the things we've focused on in that document is simplifying tax. So we said, look, let's get rid of fringe benefit tax for small business. You know, let's be able to, you know, give staff, you know, a meal or some gyms, you know, some gym visits or whatever else as rewards, you know, during the way forward. You know, we're all going to be a bit light on for cash, and of course it's other small businesses that benefit from being able to use, you know, restaurants, being able to have dinners out and so on. So, and it also gets rid of a lot of paperwork because, you know, for all of us who run businesses, fringe benefit tax is a pain in the neck, to put it mildly. We've also suggested to government that they should make instant asset write-off at 150,000, which is what it is at the moment. And I think yesterday was extended, that it was extended to the end of the year, permanent, because then businesses could elect, then you wouldn't have to depreciate assets because there's not that many assets worth more than that. And remember, 150,000 at the moment is for each asset. So you can buy lots of them if you happen to have lots of money and take them off your tax immediately. You could choose to depreciate if that's better for your tax situation. We've also suggested to government that they need to legislate 30-day payment times. One of the things that I found most disappointing, really, of the whole COVID scenario is how many big businesses have chosen to slow down payment times, and in some cases not pay at all. Just say, look, you know, you'll just have to wait until things get better. And I don't think that's reasonable. Well, it's not reasonable. Big businesses should never use small businesses as cheap banks. So we think we've got to actually, once and for all, have a scenario where people pay their accounts in 30 days or less. We've also suggested, I mean, I could go through a list, but I'll just, you know, talk about one other, and that's government procurement. You know, governments spend a lot of money every year in Australia, and that's state and federal government. We think that state government, state, territory, federal government should pull their finger out on this one and say, okay, we are going to buy local. We always say we do, but I have to say often not so much. Often, you know, some of the rats and mice stuff, we call it the sandwiches and paperclip stuff, comes local. But then when it comes to bigger contracts, they go interstate or internationally, and often internationally. I think this is the time when governments have got to focus on what they can do to support businesses, and particularly local businesses. And businesses always say to me, hey, yeah, grants are important, but gee whiz, what we want is business. We want customers. That's what we really want. And we need a campaign, as we were just talking about, to encourage Australians to holiday locally, to buy locally, to buy Australian, In fact, just an amusing side is my executive officer just came back from lunch. She said it took her 8 shops to find Australian-made socks.
Wow.
But she found some. So she was like, I've got to buy Australian-made, but gee whiz, it's hard sometimes. But there you go. Yeah. It's possible to even find Australian-made socks. So, so we've got. Look, those are some of the things we can do, you know, and we all individually can make sure that we do shop local. You know, we shop, we buy Australian-made from our local, our local producers. If you've got to buy online, buy Australian online, not international online. But most importantly, if we look after our own businesses, you know, by doing what my EO did, everyone will be better placed. The socks probably cost more than the Chinese socks, but she was pretty proud of herself.
Oh, good on her. Good effort for going out and finding those.
Yeah, I agree.
Just to bring it back, you mentioned a little bit about wholesalers using small businesses essentially as cheap banks. There are a number of operators in the territory that are owed money by wholesalers. Is there any advice that you have on how they can go about getting this money from them?
Come to us. Cool. Quite seriously. My office actually has coverage of the territories. So because the Northern Territory doesn't have a small business commissioner itself, we can cover. We will handle business problems in the Northern Territory. We are very cost effective. We're free, so that's good. So bring the complaint to us. We'll follow up with the wholesaler involved. It's amazing how a letter with a smart, government-looking logo at the top can encourage payment or put you up the payment ladder a little bit further. So, and we also have a capacity to require mediation and so on. But in the first instance, it's about shaking the tree a bit and seeing what we can do. So, the website of my office has a dispute resolution tool, but it's also got a phone number for those that don't like filling in online forms.
Beautiful. I'm sure those letterheads will leave wholesalers quaking in their boots.
Well, it's not okay, is it really? I mean, I know everybody's doing it tough, but you don't make the people with least capacity to deal with that, pick up the can, really. And so, pushing your problem down the supply chain is not ethical or moral.
Hey, Kate, just to clarify, so businesses can receive assistance from your office for disputes that they might have with other businesses and even Commonwealth government agencies as well?
Yep, that's right. That's right. If you've got a problem with the ATO, we'll handle it. If you've got a problem, with any Commonwealth agency, we'll give it a shot for you. And we're pretty successful. But so it can be big businesses, small businesses, Commonwealth departments, Commonwealth agencies, and even if it's a problem with the territory government, we'll attempt to facilitate a better outcome. But hopefully, the territory government is, focused on supporting territory businesses, which I know it is.
And a question just came in: is that cover banks as well?
Yep, we love taking on banks. That's our favourite thing. So if you've got and we've done lots of them. So, and we can also help you if you've got a problem with landlords and so on, if you can't get it solved, in the Northern Territory.
That's good to know. And with things like, I know that some businesses, with it coming up to tax time, are having a few stresses about paying superannuation.
This is the non-negotiable one. You can anything other than superannuation. The ATO has got capacity to give you a deferred plan, to give you a payment plan. The problem is that the super legislation gives no flexibility. So you really need to pay your super. So put that right at the top of the pile, because there are really quite significant penalties if you don't. And, you know, some of those penalties are things like if you don't pay your super on time, then there's penalties, and also when you do pay it, it's not tax deductible, which is, you know, oops, you know, not good. So can I suggest that that's the one you've really got to pay? Other things, you know, PAYGW, BAS, other things, the ATO will enter into payment plans for you if you're struggling. Sorry, I know it's a challenge, but that's the one to pay, you've got to pay.
That's really good to know. That's really clear advice. And just if businesses are having troubles with ongoing costs, or they can't afford overheads associated with reopening, is there any kind of support or advice that you'd offer businesses in that position?
Look, can I say something that's probably not going to be, you know, I told you I wasn't terribly politically correct before, but you know, if you can't afford overheads associated with reopening, if you're really struggling in that space, can I suggest the first thing you do is sit down with your financial advisor and really make a call on whether the business is viable going forward. The ATO, on the ATO website, there's a great business viability assessment tool, which you could choose to have a look at to start with. But, you know, the worst thing any of us can do in business is keep a business that really doesn't have a future going, you know, because the longer you keep going, the bigger the debt gets, the harder it is, the more likely, you know, it is that you know, there could be liquidation, bankruptcy, and other issues. So first of all, do a business viability assessment, you know, hopefully with your accountant or your business advisor. Then if the business is viable, there's a range of options. There's the federal government has got an SME guarantee loan. Now, those are available not just from the big banks, but from a range of other entities. They can be quite small or bigger. There's no payments for the first 6 months. There is interest, so it's not free money, but so make sure you work that out. But there's a whole list of companies and financial institutions that can provide that for you, and also don't underestimate some of the fintechs, the online lenders. Their interest rates are higher, there's no doubt, so you have to look at that really seriously. But sometimes they have quite short loan periods, which might be what you're looking for. As I'm sure all of everyone online today is aware of, that the Northern Territory government, you know, has a grant available, you know, to, you know, very small business. I think, you know, I had a look at it, and it was, you know, $5,000 if you've got 2 to 4 employees, 20,000 up to 19, so on. So there, you know, there are some grants available for eligible businesses. And, you know, as much as I don't like to say this, there is a capacity to draw down on your super. $10,000 this year, $10,000 next year. Not a great time to draw down on your super, and it should be a last resort. But if, you know, if you just really need some cash to get your business up and running again, it is viable. Well, you know, your super is your money, doesn't belong to anyone else.
Yeah, that's right. The advice that you're giving about that grant there was really great. That was the Small Business Survival Fund, I believe, that you're referencing,
right.
Which it has closed in the Territory now.
Oh, has it? Oh, dear.
Yeah, I know. A lot of businesses did manage to access it, and it has been a real lifeline out here. Something that we do still have going on in the Territory is the accounting firm KPMG are offering free one-on-one sessions with businesses. Yeah, just
well,
so
there you go. That would be the answer then. There's a free session, you know, to really assess whether your business is viable or not. You know, sometimes it's just not going to work going forward, and it's important to pull the plug as soon as possible in that scenario. And look, if you don't mind, can I just go on to what happens if that's where you find yourself? There's a website called business.gov.au. So, and if you go into business.gov.au and just type into the search, closing my business, it gives you some good advice on the things you need to think about. You know, what the process is to close a business. And, you know, it is important to remember that you do have an obligation to pay all of your employees, all of their entitlements, you know, as part of that whole process. But it does run through, you know, the things that you should do, you need to do in pretty simple terms. Let's hope that's not the case, but if it is, it's important to do it efficiently and to not forget stuff, and that will help you.
That's right. That's very useful. I can imagine it's probably one of the toughest decisions a person has to make to close a business, and having clear advice like that is very, very important. I'm going to hand over to Stephen now. Thanks so much for all of your advice, Kate. It's been really, really useful, really amazing.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Kate. It's been great to have you on here, and thank you very much for giving your generous time to us today. I wrote down what you did say was business at its best is tough, and right now is beyond that. And so thank you for saying that. And there's the time right now is perfect for us to digitize our business, to get a website, to make sure that we're using apps and innovating to make sure we streamline our processes of our business, and also looking forward to have goals and to be able to achieve those goals, which also then leads us into our speaker for next week. We've got a speaker, his name is Nigel Collins, and he is he says he's the global thought leader and author of Game of Inches, and he is coming on next week to share about what the right methodology and the right mindset is that you can do for your tourism business. And so that is going to be awesome. That is not going to be recorded as per the speaker's request. And so make sure that you sign in next week to watch that live, because he is a traveling speaker, and that is what he talks about. So we're honoured to have him online next week to share his thoughts for business in general, but he's going to also tailor it for us as tourism businesses. So stay tuned for that. That's next week. In the meantime, tomorrow morning, which is rather soon, we're now hosting the Honourable Michael Gunner. He's the Chief Minister of the Northern Territory, and we're also hosting the Honourable Lauren Moss. She's the Minister for Tourism, Sport and Culture. It's going to be right here on Zoom, and it's the live Q&A that we normally do weekly, which we've now done ad hoc. So that's tomorrow morning, 8:30 a.m. Be sure to tune in on that one. There's going to be a couple of awesome updates, and it would just be great to have a chat with Michael Gunner as well. If you're not already, if you haven't already completed it, and if you're open or opening, make sure that you've completed your NTG COVID-19 safety plan. That's a necessity if you do operate from now onwards. And then following it on from that, once you've done that NTG one, make sure that you're welcome to do the Quality Tourism COVID-19 Practicing Business module. So the Australian Tourism Industry Council and WorkSafe Australia have put together a customised tourism-specific self-assessed online module, and it's free for businesses. And so that's really helpful. We've had testimonies of people that have completed it, and they said it went the extra mile. It gave them a different look at their business, the facets of their business, for example, vehicles, on what to clean and what they need to put in their cleaning and risk assessments. And that also gives you recognition and digital assets and logos, and it just gives credibility in general for the tourism sector up here. So I recommend you to do that. And finally, if you're needing business assistance, same as what Kate said, and you're not sure about reopening, the DTBI business health check page is a good page to look at. So I recommend going there to find out more. So that concludes our Power Up tutorial today. Thank you so much for attending, and we look forward to seeing you next week, same time, same place, and we're going to have Nigel Collins here with us to share. Thank you.